Coming up today, Korea's rival parties are poised to go toe-to-toe on a series of pressing issues as August's extraordinary session gets underway at the National Assembly. Firmly entrenched in their views, it could be a long month in Parliament. With 1 week to go before Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe releases a statement marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, US lawmakers reiterate their call for Abe to sincerely apologize for his country's past wrongdoings. Plus, in line with the government's drive to re-energize Korea's public sector, plans are put in place to expand a performance-based incentive system for public sector workers. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 7th of August. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We start at Korea's National Assembly. The August extraordinary session kicks off today, but how much gets done remains to be seen, with the two biggest parties refusing to budge on a number of major issues. This session and a key parliamentary inspection of the government set for September could end up being pretty unproductive. Park Ji-won starts us off.
This month's assembly session has started, but the rival parties have still yet to agree on the timetable as they remain at loggerheads over a number of pressing issues. Given the lack of scheduling, the August session looks set to be another grind. The main sticking points are the surveillance allegations surrounding the spy agency and the redrawing of electoral districts for next year's general elections set for April. The latter is particularly urgent. The National Election Commission has requested the Assembly complete the redistricting process by August 13th. Election law states that new constituencies should be confirmed 6 months before the general elections, and NEC officials will need several weeks to do their own administrative work once plans have been handed over to them. On Thursday, the ruling Saenuri Party rejected the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's latest proposal on the matter. The NPAD suggested a region-based proportional representative system in exchange for accepting the ruling party's proposal for an open primary system of selecting candidates. But with the Saenuri Party rejecting that proposal, the parties will have to go back to the drawing board. Reforming the nation's rigid labor market is another potential flashpoint during this month's session. In line with President Park Geun-hye's speech on Thursday, the ruling party has vowed to support the administration's plan to make the labor market more flexible. It hopes to finalize the reforms by the end of this year through the nation's Tri-Party Commission of Labor, Management and Government. But the NPAD hopes to discuss the matter within a new committee, one not only aimed at labor market reform, but also overhauling the management structure of Korea's family-run conglomerates. This month's extraordinary session was convened with the aim of approving a number of urgent economic-related bills. On top of this, lawmakers also have to get ready for the parliamentary inspection of the government that will take place for 20 days next month. However, given the current climate between the two parties, it seems likely the standoff will spill over into September's session as well. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, it looks like public workers in Korea will have to work harder than before if they want to earn a little extra money and potentially climb up the career ladder faster. Performance-based incentives are likely to be expanded in the public sector as part of President Park Geun-hye's drive for major economic reforms. Han Dan reports.
Lack of efficiency and productivity have been a chronic problem in Korea's public sector, where the wage system is based on seniority rather than performance. But a change may be in the works. Following President Park Geun-hye's address to the nation on Thursday, the Ministry of Personnel Management said it's pushing for an expansion of performance-based incentives for public workers. President Park, during Thursday's speech, emphasized the need to reform the current wage system in the public sector to make it more flexible and merit-based. The ministry told Arirang News that the current performance evaluation system for civil servants is divided into 4 grades, S, A, B, and C, but a double S will be introduced for the top 1 to 2% of workers that exhibit outstanding performance. Workers receiving a grade of SS will be paid 50% more than the current bonus for a grade of S. Employees that perform below average will be relocated to a department deemed more suitable. Experts believe the work harder to earn more drive will provide the incentive for Korean public workers to increase productivity. The Personnel Ministry says talks are underway with the Finance Ministry on the issue of budget allocation. When the talks are finalized, the new incentive system will officially take effect by the end of this year. 한다은, Arirang News.
Korea's listed firms posted weaker than expected earnings in the second quarter, with the nation's big three shipbuilders dragging down the overall figure. According to market researcher FN Guide on Friday, the operating profit of 100 companies traded on the main Kospi and secondary Kosdaq tallied a combined $17 billion in the April to June period. That's 18% lower than the projected $20.8 billion. The latest figures were affected by Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries, which suffered heavy losses from a delay in the construction of offshore facilities amid low oil prices. The quarterly earnings of the remaining firms, without those shipbuilders, actually exceeded market expectations by 2.5%. Samsung Electronics has made considerable progress in the semiconductor industry, narrowing the gap on US rival Intel in terms of chip sales. According to the latest report by industry tracker IC Insight, Samsung registered sales of $10.3 billion from April to June. That's up 10% from 3 months earlier. The Korean electronics giant is the fastest growing among the top 20 semiconductor companies listed. Intel retained its top ranking, however, one spot ahead of Samsung, with a 3% rise in sales. In 2014, Intel's sales exceeded Samsung's by 36%, but was reduced to 16% in the second quarter of this year. A resolution calling for the swift approval of the South Korea-US Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement has been submitted to US Congress. Seoul's Foreign Ministry says House Representative Ed Royce and Senator Benjamin Cardin introduced a resolution in the hope of speeding up the implementation of the long-awaited deal. The agreement has been under congressional review since it was signed in June. If there are no objections raised during the set 90-day period, the pact will go into effect. That said, no one really expects any objections to it. The two countries inked the agreement after more than 4 years of negotiations. The deal bans reprocessing and enrichment, but allows Seoul to begin research into a new technology for spent nuclear fuel recycling, known as pyroprocessing. More scientific facilities are known to have been affected by live anthrax shipments from a military lab in the United States. The Pentagon says an additional 107 labs, academic institutions and commercial companies were found to have received live anthrax bacteria by mistake, and this raises the total number to 193. The new cases include one facility that received live bacteria directly from a U.S. Defense Department lab in Utah, while the other 106 were secondary recipients that were passed the same live samples from the primary labs. Now, by country, Norway was newly added to the list, raising the number of affected countries to 8. That total does include South Korea, which learned about a mistaken shipment to the Osan Air Base in late May from the US military, which failed to properly sterilize the spores. None of the newly added labs, we must add, are in South Korea. Now, with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe poised to release a statement marking the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, US officials are urging Abe to sincerely apologize for the atrocious crimes Japan committed during the conflict. This comes as a panel advising Abe in Japan has reportedly advised him to mention the country's wartime aggression in his statement. Connie Kim reports.
Face history and apologize for its past atrocities. This is what U.S. lawmakers are urging the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to include in his upcoming statement marking the 70th anniversary of World War II this month. In a commentary to Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, Congressman Mike Honda said Thursday, Abe should not miss the opportunity to apologize to women tortured by Japan during wartime, especially as time is running out for the few remaining survivors. Congressman Charles Rangel echoed the sentiment, saying if Abe acknowledges Japan's historical wrongdoings in his statement, it'll affirm the administration's pursuit for peace and human rights issues. The newly adopted so-called Comfort Women Resolution by the Chicago City Council adds weight to such growing voices. The resolution, to be delivered to the Korean American community this month, calls on the public schools in Chicago to take action to educate students about the issue when covering World War II. More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military at comfort stations in the early 20th century. There are indications that Japan will acknowledge its historical wrongdoings, as only 2 members of the 16-member panel advising Abe on his statement are said to have opposed to the idea of using the word aggression in the statement. Whether or not the Japanese leader will walk the path of peace and reconciliation remains to be seen, as his statement is set to be released on August 14th. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, a North Korean expert says last month's tightly controlled local elections in North Korea helped to solidify Kim Jong-un's grip on power. Writing for the US-based website 38 North, Alexander Mansurov said the elections gave Kim the opportunity to reshuffle and replace officials loyal to his father to those who suit his own preferences and priorities. Now, the North says voter turnout stood at 99.97%, with everyone voting for the single candidate put forward for their region by the ruling party. The expert says Kim replaced around 55% of the local delegates at last month's so-called elections. South Korea's former First Lady Lee Hee-ho, who is on a humanitarian trip to North Korea in hopes to improve inter-Korean relations, is visiting cultural heritage sites on this Friday, the 3rd day of her 4-day visit to the communist state. Lee, who arrived at the Myeohyangsan mountain in Pyeongbuk-do province late Thursday, is scheduled to visit the International Friendship Exhibition Center and Bohyonsa Buddhist temple, as well as other historical sites located around that mountain. It does remain to be seen whether the widow of former President Kim Dae-jung will meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during her stay at the mountain. He is known to be a regular visitor to that place. She will spend the night at a hotel on the mountain before returning to South Korea on a chartered flight on Saturday morning. The waters are becoming more choppy between the world's 2 superpowers. The United States says it can no longer tolerate China's efforts to militarize the South China Sea. Speaking at the ASEAN Regional Forum on Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry called on all claimants, especially China, to stop further land reclamation and construction of new facilities on disputed features. Now, the forum itself was dominated by Beijing's rapid expansion of reefs and construction of military posts in the South China Sea over the past 18 months or so. Kerry, who had early in the day agreed to cooperate with Japan on maritime issues, said the construction of such facilities threatened peace in the area. He did also hold talks with the Chinese Foreign Minister, and on Wednesday the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had announced that land reclamation in the South China Sea had already stopped. Now, the US official John Kerry said he hoped that was true, but other envoys at the ASEAN Forum refuted Wang's claims. Now, people born with genetic diseases often have to endure the conditions for their entire life without much hope of ever getting better, and one of those diseases is hemophilia. But Korean scientists may have found a way to fix the disorder by correcting the gene causing it in the first place. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
Hemophilia is a genetic disease that causes patients to bleed uncontrollably as their blood lacks coagulating agents that regulate blood clotting. Over 400,000 people suffer from this disease in the world, and there is currently no cure for the disorder. Hemophilia A is the most common form of the disease. It's caused when an inversion of a particular gene occurs at birth. However, in a possible breakthrough, Korean researchers have found a way to fix this irregularity. Using a type of genetic scissors, scientists cut the inverted gene and correct it so it takes the right position. They then transplant the gene into cultivated stem cells. Tested on mice, those given the fixed gene live twice as long as those without it.
Nearly half of all hemophilia patients suffer from severe symptoms, and half of them have the disease because this gene is inverted. We believe this technique could be applied to other forms of the disease that are derived from a similar mutation.
While many more studies need to be done, clinical research on humans could begin within the next 10 years. The gene correction procedure could replace the medication-based treatment for hemophiliacs, which requires regular injections throughout a patient's lifetime. The research was published in the July online edition of Cell Stem Cell. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, those have been the stories we've been following on this Friday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com, and it's also worth checking out our smartphone application. Just search for Arirang TV. Have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.